My name is Gabriella Hayes. I'm 33 years old, and the moment my relationship ended didn't come with shouting or anything dramatic enough to make sense of it. It came quietly, through a conversation that sounded like a joke, until it wasn't. I work as a product designer for a mid-sized tech company in Manchester. Most of my days are spent moving between design reviews, software iterations, meetings that run longer than they should, and the occasional late night when a launch deadline is too close to ignore. It's structured work, logical. Problems have causes, and if you know where to look, they have solutions. I've always preferred that kind of clarity. Outside of work, my life follows a rhythm that makes sense. I go to the gym a few times a week, cook most of my meals at home, and I've never really felt the need to fill every evening with noise. Quiet doesn't bother me. It never has. My boyfriend, Daniel Carter, is 30. He works as an accountant for a regional financial firm, and he's different from me in ways that used to feel balanced. He's social, quick with words, always moving, always surrounded by people. Where I'm steady, he's restless. We've been together just over 4 years, living in my apartment for about 2.5. The place is in my name. I bought it before we met, but over time it stopped feeling like mine and started feeling like ours. That's what shared routines do. At least that's what I thought. Daniel has always had a bigger social circle than I do. Nights out with coworkers, weekends with old university friends, group chats that never seem to go quiet. I never had a problem with it. My job can be mentally exhausting, and honestly, I was fine staying in while he went out. For a long time, that balance worked, or at least I believed it did. The first time something felt off was about 2 months ago. It started small. Little comments Daniel would make when we were around his friends. Nothing directly insulting, just observations, framed like jokes. At a dinner with 2 of his coworkers, he laughed and said I was probably the calmest woman in England. Then he added that I was so polite I would probably apologize to a chair if I bumped into it. Everyone laughed, including me. At the time, it seemed harmless. But after that, it became a pattern. Whenever his friends were around, Daniel would point out how predictable my schedule was, how I never argued, how I always tried to keep the peace. He'd say it with a smile like it was something charming, and maybe part of it was. But over time, the way he said it started to feel deliberate. Like he wasn't just describing me, like he was defining me. Last Saturday was when everything shifted. Daniel came home just after midnight. I was still in the living room, laptop open, finishing up a few design revisions for a project that needed to go out Monday morning. I remember hearing his keys before I looked up. He dropped his bag onto the chair, kicked off his shoes, and walked straight into the kitchen without really acknowledging me. That part wasn't unusual. What was unusual was the look on his face. He looked amused, not the kind of amusement you share with someone, the kind you bring back with you. He poured himself a glass of water, leaned against the counter, and then said something that, at the time, didn't sound like it would matter. He told me his friends had been talking about me again. I closed my laptop halfway, more out of habit than concern, and asked what they said. He shrugged like it wasn't a big deal. He said the general consensus was that I was nice, reliable, stable. Then he paused for just a second and added that they also thought I was boring. He didn't say it carefully. He said it like he expected me to laugh. I didn't. I asked him what he meant by that. He waved it off at first, said it wasn't serious, just that compared to some of the women his friends were dating, I was calm, predictable. Then he said something else. He said a couple of them joked that I was the kind of woman men settle down with after they've had their fun. The way he said it was casual, but not accidental. I closed my laptop completely this time and looked at him properly, and asked him if that was something he agreed with. Daniel smiled, not fully, just enough, and said he could see their point. According to him, I was dependable, easy to be with, no drama, no chaos. Then he said I was almost too nice. I remember asking him why he was telling me this now. That's when the conversation stopped feeling like a joke. He set his glass down, sat across from me at the table, and said something that changed everything. He said sometimes he wondered what it would have been like if he had dated someone more exciting, before settling down with someone like me. He said it the way someone talks about trying a different restaurant, like it was just an idea, something casual, something harmless. I stared at him for a few seconds, waiting for something in his expression to suggest he didn't mean it the way it sounded. There was nothing, so I asked him to repeat it. He rolled his eyes slightly, like I was already taking it too seriously. Then he explained. He said a lot of people go through phases, that some relationships are intense, chaotic, even messy, but memorable, that he never really had that. He said every woman he dated before me had been Similar. Responsible, predictable, safe. Then he looked at me and said I was probably the most extreme version of that. I remember asking him, very calmly, what exactly he wanted me to do with that information. He shrugged, like the answer was obvious. Then he said the sentence that flipped something in my head. He said sometimes he wondered if he should have experienced dating a wild woman before settling down. I looked at him, really looked at him, and then I said, okay. Not sarcastic, not angry, just okay. He blinked, like he hadn't expected that to be my response. But before he could say anything else, I stood up and walked toward the bedroom. I didn't rush. That was the part Daniel didn't understand later. He thought what I did next came from anger, from impulse, from some emotional reaction that would burn out if he just waited long enough. It didn't. By the time I opened the closet, my mind was already clear. We still had a couple of empty moving boxes stacked on the top shelf from when we first moved in together. I pulled 2 of them down, set them on the floor, and started folding his clothes. Shirts first, then the jeans he always left draped over the chair, then the jackets he rotated through depending on the weather. I folded everything carefully, the same way I always did when I organized the apartment on Sundays. There was no anger in the movement, no hesitation either, just completion. At first, Daniel stayed in the kitchen. I could hear him moving around, opening cabinets, probably expecting me to come back and continue the conversation. Maybe he thought I needed a minute to cool off. 5 minutes passed. Then I heard his footsteps coming down the hallway. He stopped in the doorway. I didn't look up right away. I zipped one of the smaller bags, set it aside, and only then turned slightly toward him. He was staring at the open suitcase on the bed, like it didn't make sense. "Gabriella, what are you doing?" he asked. His tone wasn't angry yet, just confused. "I'm packing your things," I said. "For what?" I folded another shirt, placed it neatly into the suitcase, and then answered. "So you can go date the kind of woman you feel like you missed out on." There was a pause. The kind where someone's brain needs a second to catch up. Then Daniel laughed, not a nervous laugh, a dismissive one. "Are you serious right now?" he said. "You're throwing a tantrum over a conversation?" I didn't respond to that part. I just kept packing. "I'm not upset," I said evenly. "I'm responding to what you told me." He stepped further into the room, arms crossing over his chest. "You're overreacting," he said. "I was speaking hypothetically. Normal people understand that." "I understand perfectly," I replied. I zipped the suitcase halfway, then reached for the toiletries from the dresser. "You said you feel like you missed out on a certain kind of relationship," I continued. "I'm removing the obstacle that's preventing you from experiencing that." That was when the smile disappeared. Daniel's posture changed. Subtle, but immediate. "You're being ridiculous," he said. "It was just a thought." "It wasn't just a thought," I said, finally looking at him directly. "You didn't say it like one." He shook his head, running a hand through his hair. "This is exactly what I mean," he muttered. "You take everything so seriously." I didn't argue that. Instead, I closed the suitcase completely and zipped it shut. Then I stood up, lifted it off the bed, and walked past him. He turned as I passed, following me into the living room. "Gabriella, come on," he said, his tone shifting slightly, trying to pull things back. "You're really going to do this? Over one conversation?" I set the suitcase down beside the front door. Then I went back to the bedroom and grabbed the box with the rest of his things. "No," I said as I walked past him again. "Not over one conversation." "Then what?" I placed the box next to the suitcase and reached for the door handle. "The mindset behind it," I said. And then I opened the door. The hallway outside was quiet. Too quiet for the moment that was unfolding. Daniel stopped a few steps behind me. "What are you doing?" he asked, sharper now. I stepped aside from the doorway. "You should probably call one of your friends," I said. "Maybe they know someone exciting you can try dating." For a few seconds, he didn't move. He just stared at the open door. Then something clicked, and everything changed. "Are you actually serious right now?" he snapped. "Yes." That was when the anger hit. It came fast, like a switch flipping. "Have you lost your mind?" he said, his voice rising. "Close the door and stop acting like this." I didn't move. "You just told me you feel like you missed out," I said calmly. "I'm giving you the opportunity to fix that." "That's not what I meant," he shot back. But the tone didn't match the words. It wasn't confusion. It was frustration. Frustration at losing control of the conversation. "You're twisting everything," he continued. "I said something normal. People talk about things like that." "People don't usually evaluate their partner out loud like that," I said. That landed. I could see it in the way his expression tightened. But instead of backing down, he pushed harder. You're being dramatic," he said. "This is exactly why people think you're—" He stopped himself. Too late. "Boring," I finished for him. Silence. Just for a second. Then he looked away. I didn't wait. I picked up the suitcase, stepped forward, and placed it just outside the apartment door. The wheels scraped lightly against the floor. Then I set the box beside it. When I turned back, Daniel was staring at me like he was seeing me differently for the first time. "You can't just kick me out," he said. "I live here too." "You've been living here," I corrected. "The lease is in my name. Every bill is in my name." That shifted something. Not emotionally. Practically, he knew I wasn't wrong. "You can come back tomorrow during the day," I added, "if there's anything else you need." "But tonight," I said, stepping back and holding the door open. "You're leaving." He stared at me. A long, quiet stare. Then the shouting started, loud enough that I briefly wondered if someone down the hall would open their door. "You're unbelievable," he said. "You're controlling. You're actually trying to punish me for being honest." I let him talk, let him cycle through it. Anger, accusations, a few attempts to turn it into a normal argument. But I didn't engage. I just waited. And when he finally stopped long enough to breathe, I said one thing. "If you believe you need something else before settling down," I said, "then I'm not the person you should be with." That's not punishment," I added quietly. "That's logic." He opened his mouth, ready to argue again, but nothing came out immediately. So I continued. "The engagement is over, Daniel." That was the moment everything shifted again. Because this time, he heard it. For a second, Daniel didn't react. Not because he didn't understand what I said, but because he did. And it landed. Harder than anything else I'd said that night. The anger didn't disappear, it just changed shape. He ran a hand through his hair again, pacing once across the living room like he was trying to reset the conversation in his head. "Gabriella, come on," he said, his tone shifting, faster now, less certain. "You're blowing this way out of proportion." I didn't respond. I just stood by the open door, steady, waiting. "People say things sometimes," he continued. "Stupid things. It doesn't mean anything." "It meant something when you said it," I replied. "That's not fair," he snapped. "You're acting like I just told you I want to leave." I met his eyes. "You didn't have to say it directly," I said. "You already framed it." That frustrated him more than if I had yelled. Because there was nothing to argue against. No emotion to push back on. Just clarity. He exhaled sharply, then changed tactics. "This is about my friends, isn't it?" he said. "They made a joke, and now you're turning it into something bigger than it is." That's the first time you framed it like that," I said. He frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means earlier, you didn't say it like something they thought," I explained. "You said it like something you agreed with." He opened his mouth, closed it, looked away, and for a moment there it was. The hesitation, the truth he hadn't planned on saying out loud. But instead of acknowledging it, he pivoted again. "You're seriously ending 4 years over this?" he asked. "An engagement?" "No," I said. "I'm ending it because of what it revealed." He let out a short, incredulous laugh. "This is insane," he muttered. "You're acting like I cheated on you." "No," I said again, my voice steady. "You just made it clear you think you settled." That hit differently. I could see it, because now he wasn't arguing about the situation anymore. He was trying to escape what it meant. "I didn't say that," he insisted. "You didn't have to." The silence that followed stretched longer this time. Heavy, uncomfortable. The kind that forces people to sit with something they'd rather avoid. Daniel broke it first. "You know what's going to happen, right?" he said suddenly, his tone sharpening again. "Everyone's going to hear about this." I didn't react. "My friends, your friends, people at work," he continued. "They're all going to think you're unstable, that you threw away a relationship over nothing." "They're allowed to think whatever they want," I said. That answer didn't help him. It made it worse. Because it took away another angle. "You don't even care?" he said, almost incredulous. "No," I said simply. "I don't." That wasn't entirely true. I understood what he was trying to do. Shift the focus. Make this about perception instead of reality. But perception didn't change what had already been said. And it didn't change how I saw it. He tried again. "You're just going to stand there and act like this is normal?" he asked. "Like this is how people handle things?" "No," I said. "This is how I handle this." That stopped him. Not completely, but enough. Because now he was starting to realize something he hadn't before. This wasn't a temporary reaction. This wasn't something that was going to cool down overnight. This was final. "You're going to regret this," he said after a moment, quieter now. "You always do this." "Do what?" "Make these quiet decisions," he said, gesturing vaguely toward me, and then refused to budge, like there's no room for anything else. For once, I didn't disagree. "In this case," I said, "there isn't." He stared at me again. Longer this time, trying to find something in my expression that suggested uncertainty. There wasn't anything there. And that's when the shift happened. The real one. The anger didn't disappear, but underneath it, something else surfaced. Panic. You're not seriously going to end everything over this, he said, his voice tightening slightly. Just think about it for a second. I already did, I replied. No, you didn't, he said quickly. You reacted. I processed, I corrected. That word seemed to irritate him more than anything else I'd said. Gabriella, he said, stepping closer now, lowering his voice like that would change something. Let's just go to sleep. We'll talk about this tomorrow when we're both calmer. I'm calm, I said. You're not acting like it. I am, I said. You're just not used to seeing me like this. That landed. He stopped moving for a second, because he knew it was true. I wasn't louder. I wasn't angrier. I was just done. And that was unfamiliar. He looked at the suitcase sitting outside the door, then at the box, then back at me. You're really kicking me out, he said quietly. Yes, in the middle of the night. You just came from the night out, I said. You have options. He let out a breath, something between a laugh and disbelief. This is insane, he said again, but there was less conviction behind it now. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The door was still open. The decision was still standing, and he could see that nothing he said was moving it. For a moment, he didn't move, like he was waiting for me to say something else, to soften it, to take it back. I didn't. So eventually, the anger came back, because it was easier than admitting what was underneath. He stepped forward, grabbed the suitcase handle harder than necessary, the wheels scraping sharply against the floor. Then he picked up the box. You're unbelievable, he muttered as he walked past me into the hallway. I didn't follow. I didn't stop him. I just stood there, watching as he moved toward the elevator without looking back. The doors opened, closed, and then he was gone. I stood in the doorway for a few seconds longer, just to make sure. Then I closed the door and locked it. The apartment went quiet immediately. Not dramatic, not heavy, just different. I stayed there for a minute, letting it settle. 4 years is a long time to share space with someone. And when they're suddenly not there anymore, you notice it. Not in some overwhelming way, just in the absence of movement, of noise, of expectation. I walked back into the living room slowly. His jacket was still draped over the chair. His charger was still plugged in by the couch. Small things. Things that didn't matter anymore. I picked them up, placed them into another box, and set it by the door with the rest. Then I sat down. For the first time since the conversation started. About 10 minutes later, my phone started buzzing. I didn't need to check to know who it was. I let it ring. Then again, and again. On the fourth call, I picked up my phone and looked at the screen. Daniel. I watched it ring for a few seconds. Then it stopped. Messages started coming through almost immediately. The first few were angry. Unbelievable. Childish. You can't be serious. Then the tone shifted. We need to talk. I'm still outside. Open the door. I read them once. Then I opened the contact settings and blocked his number, not out of anger, not out of spite. Just because there was nothing left in that conversation that would change anything. After that, I blocked him on the messaging apps we used. Then I set my phone down and leaned back into the couch. About 5 minutes later, there was a knock on the door. Not loud this time. Just steady. Gabriella, his voice came through, quieter now. Open the door. Let's talk like adults. I didn't move. The knocking continued for a few minutes, then stopped. Silence again. About 20 minutes later, I heard the elevator doors open, then close. And that was the last I heard from him that night. I woke up earlier than usual the next morning. Not because I hadn't slept. I had. But the apartment felt different. Not empty. Just unfamiliar in a way that took a second to adjust to. There was no movement in the kitchen. No sound of someone opening cabinets. No quiet background noise of another person existing in the same space. Just stillness. I got up, made coffee, and followed my routine without thinking too much about it. That part didn't change. It never does. When I checked my phone, there were no messages from Daniel. That made sense. His number was already blocked. What I did notice were 2 missed calls from an unknown number around 2 in the morning. I looked at them for a second, then locked the screen. I didn't call back. Around 9, I started going through the apartment again. Closet first, then the shoes by the door, then the bathroom. Everything that was his, I packed. Neatly, efficiently, no hesitation. By the time I was done, there were 3 boxes lined up next to the entrance. Ready. About 30 minutes later, there was a knock. I already knew it was him. When I opened the door, Daniel was standing in the hallway. He looked tired. Not in a dramatic way. Just worn down, like he hadn't slept much. His hair wasn't styled the way it usually was, and he was holding his phone tightly in one hand, like he'd been using it nonstop. The first thing he said wasn't a greeting. You blocked me. Not a question. A statement. Yes, I said. He exhaled through his nose like he was trying to stay calm. So this is how you're handling it? He asked. 4 years and you just cut me off? There's nothing left to discuss, I said. There is, he insisted quickly. You're just choosing not to. He stepped forward like he was about to walk past me into the apartment. I shifted slightly, blocking the doorway without making it obvious. Then I pointed to the boxes behind me. Everything you still had here is packed, I said. That's when the tension snapped back into place. You're unbelievable, he said, shaking his head. No normal person reacts like this over one conversation. It wasn't one conversation, I replied. It was what the conversation revealed. He let out a short laugh, but there was no humor in it. You turned something small into this, he said, gesturing between us. Into this. I didn't turn it into anything, I said. I responded to it. That's not a response, he snapped. That's an overreaction. I didn't argue that. I just looked at him and waited, because I'd already heard every version of this argument the night before. He ran a hand through his hair again, pacing once in the hallway. Then he stopped and looked at me like the situation was temporary, like this was still something he could fix. You're going to calm down, he said. In a day or two, you're going to realize you went too far. I didn't respond. You always do this, he continued. You make these quiet decisions, and then later you... I'm not calling you, I said. That stopped him mid-sentence. You don't know that, he said quickly. I do. He shook his head, almost smiling like I just didn't understand myself. People don't throw away 4 years like this, he said. An engagement. That's not how this works. I already did, I replied. The silence that followed was shorter this time, but heavier, because now he was starting to understand something he hadn't before. This wasn't temporary. There was no swing back, no emotional rebound, no argument left to win. This is stubborn, he said finally. Yes, I said. And you're just okay with this, he asked. Just ending it. Yes. That answer seemed to frustrate him more than anything else, because it left no room, no opening, no negotiation. He tried one more time. Every woman has thoughts like that sometimes, he said. It doesn't mean they actually want to leave. You are supposed to understand that. I do understand, I said. He looked at me, waiting. I understand that you don't see me as someone you chose because you truly wanted me, I continued. You see me as the stable option after everything else. That's not what I said, he argued. It's what you meant, I said. And this time, he didn't have a response. Not immediately. Because somewhere in everything he'd said the night before, he knew it wasn't entirely wrong. I bent slightly, picked up one of the boxes, and set it in the hallway next to him. Then I handed him the second. He took it automatically, still watching me, still waiting for something, anything, a hesitation, a crack. It didn't come. Everything's there, I said. He stood there for a few seconds longer. Then he looked past me into the apartment, at the space that used to be his too. And for the first time since he showed up, there was no anger, no argument, just realization. But it came too late. Eventually he turned, walked toward the elevator, boxes in his hands. No more words, no more attempts, just silence. The doors opened, then closed, and that was it. I stood there for a second after he left. Then I closed the door, locked it, and leaned back against it for a moment. The quiet was still there, but it didn't feel strange anymore. It felt clear. I walked back into the living room slowly, taking in the space. Nothing had changed physically, but everything felt different, lighter, like something that didn't belong there anymore had finally been removed. I sat down on the couch again, looked around, and for the first time since all of this started, it didn't feel like I had lost something. It felt like I had made room. And if Daniel still wants to find out what it's like to chase something more exciting before settling down, he has all the time in the world now. Just not with me.